One of the things that you've said in light of the last 11 months is that both sides in this conflict have reason to fear that their existence is at stake in some ways, that there's no sense of a shared humanity or shared conversation. So what do you do with that? How do you get out of that?
So first of all, I start by recognizing the very painful but truthful fact that in this sense, both sides are right.
Yuval Noah Harari is an author, historian, and a thought leader from Tel Aviv. His sweeping books on human history have sold more than 45 million copies. His latest, Nexus, is about information and how, in the era of artificial intelligence, the truth can be weaponized. He joined me on stage to discuss some of the big questions of our time, including his views on October the 7th and the Israel-Gaza conflict. Here's part of our conversation.
This is a book of our time in many ways. It is about information networks more broadly. And you are very specific in terms of defining that term. What do you mean when you say an information network?
Well, the key thing about information is that information is not truth. As many people tend to think, especially in places like Silicon Valley, most information in the world is fiction and fantasies and delusions and so forth. The main function of information is to connect a lot of individuals into a network, an army, a church, a tribe, a state, a corporation, a market. They are connected by information. Sometimes the information that connects them is the truth, but not always.
You started by saying that information is not truth, and that one of the things that happens, and this comes up in the book, you've argued this in past, is that truth is complicated, it's unpleasant, as opposed to lies, which can be simple and flattering. And in the book you write, I just want to read this. Mm-hmm. An Israeli politician who in her election speeches details the miseries inflicted on Palestinian citizens by an Israeli occupation is unlikely to get many votes. In contrast, a politician who builds a national myth by ignoring uncomfortable facts, focusing on glorious moments in the Jewish past, and meshing reality wherever possible, may well sweep to power. And that could be applicable, as you say, to many nations around the world.
To every nation. It's not unique about Israel and the Jewish people.
How would you apply that to Israel now? Mm-hmm. A country that you have great affection and great concern, great affection for and great concern for.
Yeah, I think it is at a moment of historical crisis in the history, not just of Israel, but really of Judaism and of the Jewish people. And for me, really the key question is whether the Jewish people has learned anything in the last 2,000 years.
Since October the 7th, Harari has been fiercely critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and his leadership in Israel and his government's actions toward Palestinians. He's also spoken out about what he sees as indifference on the side of the global left toward the actions of Hamas.
Part of this is about the issue of information and what people aren't talking about, and the way that people, like this idea of filter bubbles, and this idea that people live in their own reality in some ways.
Like you have, of course, Israelis and the Jewish Israelis and Palestinians, they live in completely separate realities. And also within Israel itself, the country is divided into separate realities, where one camp sees Netanyahu as he is the most hated figure in Israeli history and held responsible for the worst catastrophe in Israel's history, as well as for trying to destroy the country's democracy and its ethical basis. And then you have another camp which basically sees him as the Messiah, as God's chosen one, as the most smartest person on the earth. And they look at the same facts. They look at what happened on October 7th, and they look at what happened afterwards, and they just see completely different realities. You know, when the internet just started, the main metaphor was the web, the World Wide Web, like this web of information which will connect everybody, and now people live inside separate cocoons, and there is just no way to reach from one cocoon to the other cocoon.
What do you do with that? I mean, one of the things that you've said in light of the last 11 months is that both sides in this conflict have reason to fear that their existence is at stake in some ways, that there's no sense of a shared humanity.
So first of all, I start by recognizing the very painful but truthful fact that in this sense, both sides are right. Palestinians believe that the Israelis want to completely get rid of them, and they are right. And the Israelis believe that the Palestinians want to completely get rid of us, and we are also right. They really do. It's hard in a way to keep both thoughts at the same time, but this is the reality. I mean, the key, the deep source of the conflict is that both sides are terrified for their existence, and they are correct to be terrified. It's very difficult to change the mind of somebody else, especially in a different cocoon. But we still have some ability to change our own minds. And the place I would start is to simply recognize that the other side exists, and it has a right to exist. That war, and this is true of war throughout history, war starts in the mind when you say these people, they shouldn't exist.
At a time of information overload, when outrage sells, Harari's suggestion is to consume less, not more, and slow down before you react.
For a room full of people who they're trying to figure out a way through the nonsense and see across that political divide, see the humanity that is there, what would you say to them? What's a piece of advice for people here on how they could go about doing that?
One very old piece of advice is when you read something or hear something about some politician or some person, try to think what is kind of the best explanation you can give to it, and not what is the worst explanation you can give to it. Maybe his or her words were taken out of context.
Like lead with generosity.
Yes, again, be generous with people, including with people from the other side of the political spectrum, including with especially I think with politicians. Be generous in the interpretation that you give. Don't immediately reach out for the worst possible interpretation of what this person has just said or did.
Yuval Noah Harari, thank you very much.
Thank you.